Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Farnborough Air Show, about 30 miles southwest of London, one of the world's most important air forces with industry leaders, government leaders, military leaders, and airplanes from all around the world. Our coverage here on this 100th anniversary year of the Royal Air Force is sponsored by Leonardo DRS and Farnborough International, and we're very, very honored to have with us Air Chief Marshal Sir Stephen Hillier, the Chief of the Royal Air Force on this centenary year. Sir, I know you're one of the busiest people at this show, so thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Well, good afternoon, and you're very welcome. And it's a pleasure to be here at the Farnborough Air Show, and just to a place which has so much history in aviation in the United Kingdom, and particularly to reinforce that history in the Royal Air Force's 100th year.
Absolutely, and you've worn this uniform now for 40 years, and I wanted to ask, almost 40 years, I wanted to ask you, as you look back on the 100 years of the world's first independent Air Force, all of the achievements that it has, spanning from World War I, interwar years where there was such huge innovation by the RAF in air operations, and then we saw World War II, and in the decades since throughout the Cold War, and in this past 20 years, what do you think some of the key lessons are as you look forward to the next 100 years of the force?
Well, I mean, this goes right from the start of the Royal Air Force. The Royal Air Force, the world's first unified and independent air force. There were a number of reasons why we were formed. One of them was clearly to deliver air power and military capability better. But another one was to provide a unified and coherent input into the industrial sector, to ensure that in this new developing age of aviation, as it was at the time, then we could be at the front foot of innovation and technology, and also have the people who would enable that and make it all happen. That's what was 100 years ago in people's minds. 100 years on, today, that's still what's in my mind. I have a service which is at the front end of innovation, requiring high technology delivered by UK and worldwide industries, superb people making that all happen on a day-to-day basis. But I also need to look to the future. Those 100 years ago were looking to the future, and I'm looking to the future, and what will secure the Air Force for another 100 years? And well, it's very much those things that I've been speaking about, and that's why we have gone to great lengths today to demonstrate our leadership and where we see aerospace going in the future and military capability with it.
The announcement, the Prime Minister was here, Theresa May, Gavin Williamson, the Secretary of State for Defense, was here, both talking about the future combat air strategy, something that's been very, very important to you as well. What do you foresee this airplane doing? Because there's a lot of debate and discussion, as you know. As everybody looks at the Eurofighter force, that's about 10 years old. If you look at the F-35 force, that's coming into service now with the first jets in the UK, 48 on that initial tranche of 138, if we are to listen to the last several strategic defense and security reviews. Whatever this new aircraft is, what does it need to be from your standpoint as the end user, as the RAF?
Well, as you say, Typhoon is here now and developing or delivering a fantastic capability. And Typhoon will be the core of so much of our combat air capability until the 2040s. And we'll continue to evolve and increment the capability of Typhoon. F-35 is here now. That is giving us that ability to continue to control the air in contested airspace. And we will gradually build up the F-35 force. And that includes operating from land bases and with Navy colleagues from aircraft carriers as well. But as you go through each of those technological generations, you must always be looking to the next generation. So what we're looking at is the next generation beyond the Typhoon capability. What we want to make sure is that we can continue to deliver superb air and space power in what is an increasingly contested environments, both air and space. That's both for our own purposes as air forces, but to enable the joint force. And we must do that to secure success in any future conflict. As we look to that next generation capability, why is it going to be different? Well, I described in a speech earlier today, is we're much more looking at it from the inside out. So rather than building a platform and then working out the systems within it and the weapons we might use with it, we are taking that information, data, that systems integration, the weapons, and starting with that and then building the platform around it. So it's a genuine system approach, and that's not just the platform systems, it's off-board systems, so space and within cyber and swarming UAV technology and bringing all these things together. So it's a long answer to very complex questions, but those are some of the essential things I think will need to characterize our future capabilities.
As you look at the future operating environment, and I have a threats question before we get to some programmatics, do you have a sense on, do you need more payload? Is it more speed? Is it greater range? What are the things that you're looking at in whatever the new platform is? The big breakthrough is that it could be manned, or may well be manned, or will be manned. But what are some of the other attributes that you want to it in terms of physical characteristics that scratches an itch that you can't scratch right now with what you have either in the inventory or what's planned? Because the F-35 does give tremendous leap ahead capability, but as you said, you're going to look past that as well, given that that is something that will be entering inventory. You're looking at the thing that comes after that. What are some of the other things you want this thing to be able to do?
So I don't want to, talk about, there's some, what I'd say, basic characteristics of, how fast does it go, or what's its data exchange capability, or whatever, because those are the sort of things that we need to work through. What I want to talk about are some of the things which I think are fundamental capability issues which we need to grasp across the military aerospace sector. One of them, perhaps the most important, is what I call affordable high technology. For the last several generations, we've been presented with a choice. The choice is you can either have the high-tech, leading-edge technology, but it will cost you, or you can have lower technology at a lesser price, and therefore you'll be able to have more volume. I simply don't accept being put in that position, because when I look at so many other areas of commercial enterprise, including commercial aerospace, you get high technology and you get it cheaper than the previous generation. I want that in the military aerospace. I want more affordable, cheaper, and high technology at the same time. And that will allow me to generate greater mass. And I think that is a key issue, is that we've gradually been having less and less mass. That causes immediate capability problems, is it doesn't give our adversaries as many dilemmas if we've got very few platforms, but it also gives us longer term ones about sustaining a force with relatively small numbers. So that's a key thing for me. The second thing is about time. Is that, again, we've rather started to get in our DNA that these programs must take a long time. I mean, the Typhoon, the first documents on Typhoon were signed in 1986. And now here we are, more than 3 decades later, and the platform is brilliant, but that's an awful long time. And if you look at the pace that threats are evolving, we need to do our technology evolution much more quickly. So that's another thing, time there. And then the final point I would make is that we, again, have got rather used to platforms being at their best late in their service life. Where Tornado, for example, going out of service next year from RAF service, it is at its superb level of capability. I want to get to that point much sooner in the evolution of our new platforms. So we need the flexibility and the agility to bring platforms to the maximum perfection quicker, and then incrementally grow them all the time.
Do you see, and I should note, a high-time Tornado pilot. You spent many hours in those cockpits all over the world on operations, where you were highly decorated with the Distinguished Flying Cross and an American Bronze Star as well. As you look at the future air environment, our adversaries have been, while they know that we have total mastery of the air in very expensive platforms that can penetrate their heavily defended airspace and drop relatively inexpensive weapons on them, by and large, although you do have Storm Shadow as a hip pocket, long-range, stealthy weapon that can be used for penetrating missions as well. The other guys want to win without fighting. They want to win through cyber. They want to win through deception and hybrid. But they also have decided that it's a lot cheaper to build rockets in a box to deliver mass at range with precision, as opposed to using lots of very expensive airplanes and expensive pilots to drive them. As you look at the air environment in the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years, what is the air picture going to look like? Are we going into this environment with perhaps a somewhat more dated model, a more romantic model perhaps, than the model that our adversaries are planning for us because the enemy always gets a vote?
Well, it will be a mixture. I mean, there is never one single answer to this, and in fact, a single answer to that question is, it will be wrong, and conceptually wrong as well as actually wrong. So we'll see an evolution. And if I look at the operations, for example, that we're doing against Daesh or over Syria at the moment, it's been a combination. We have unmanned systems which are operating there. Those unmanned systems are not able to operate in contested airspace, but nevertheless on a routine basis then they are doing an excellent job. There are other parts of the mission set which require a manned combat aircraft for all of the reasons which I think are well known, and that's both control of the air mission and surface attack. And then there's been aspects of the missions, as you mentioned with Storm Shadow, for example, as the attacks we did back in April, where we've used long-range standoff. And if you put all that together and then you look at what's going on across the space and cyberspace and support of that, I think that gives an idea of a rich picture and a diversity of capabilities. In terms of how I see that evolving into the future, I think there will be a greater proportion which will be unmanned, and I don't think that needs to, that's some startling statement. We just look at how things have evolved over the last few decades. There will definitely be an increased emphasis on precision and being able to do that at the greatest range you can. But so far, nobody has come up with a technical solution which is able to replace the manned combat aircraft, which is there taking control of airspace and providing precision effects. Now, I'm not saying that technology might not take us there in maybe 50 years' time, but you can't see it at the moment. In terms of our adversaries, well, I think it's telling is look at the systems that they have built up. They've done that for a very good reason. It's because they've seen the power of what we are able to deliver from the air and from space, and they are, trying to, reduce that advantage. I also look at many of those state-based powers, and they are developing air platforms. They're not just going simply for long-range rockets. And the final point, I'd come back to this precision thing. I mean, you characterize it as long-range precision rockets that our adversaries are developing. Well, most of them do not have the precision that we feel is necessary in order to be waging warfare in the way that we do, which is highly responsible, with a very clear definition of what is the legal use of force. We are highly disciplined in that respect, and most of those who oppose us aren't. I want to ensure we can continue to do warfare in our way, not theirs.
We're getting into SDSR season. There's going to be another strategic defense and security review. Budgetary challenges have always overhung this. The figure we hear is £750 million. In that, the spending will increase and the budget remains on the upward track. But that, as ever, there's always savings. There's one black hole or another that always has to be plugged. As you go into this cycle, mentally, where are you setting the boundaries of where you defend, what you protect, where you can afford to take a little bit more risk? Because this hat's going to go around and everybody's going to have to put a little bit something into it. As you're shaping this, what are your priorities on the key elements of the portfolio that you want to protect, and where do you think you can take maybe a little more risk?
So my three priorities are very much grounded in both the current operational reality and how I see the future. So the first thing is, I've got a Royal Air Force which is hugely committed to operations and has been for a significant number of years. I describe it as, we're busier now than we've been in a generation at least. That puts particular challenges in the force, and I need to make sure that we've enough, thickening, enough depth in the capability to continue to sustain those operations for as long as it takes. So I need, more Typhoon squadrons, for example, which is why I announced earlier last week, that we would be growing another 2 Typhoon squadrons. So that's part of it. The second thing I need to do is I need to fill in gaps in my current frontline capability. I don't have a maritime patrol aircraft at the moment. We're bringing into service 9 P-8 Poseidons. They will start to arrive in the not too distant future and fill in those gaps, which is really important. I also need to do more in space-based capabilities, which we're doing also. And then the third category is I need to make sure that I've got the next generation Air Force, which has the capabilities to operate in this increasingly contested and complex operating environment. And that's much more about information capabilities and joining together the whole air, space, and cyber effort, largely based on those platforms which I've already described. So those are the three broad areas that I need to focus in on, and I believe I need to do it all. I don't believe that I've got an option to take off a bit of capability and say, well, that's not as important as everything else. And the reason I believe that is because of the evidence of the world that I currently live in and the degree of pressure that my forces and my people are under on a day-to-day basis. In terms of, therefore, you describe it as when the hat comes round. Well, I am a firm believer that we need to be as an efficient an organisation as we possibly can, that we ensure that we spend every pound to maximum effect, and I believe it's always the case that we can, with appropriate, sometimes upfront investment, be more efficient organisations, and I want to take that, as much of that money as possible, and translate it into more frontline capabilities for the reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, but everything has been about efficiently delivering capability, and that's put each of the service chiefs under tremendous pressure over the last few years. Funding tends to go for the advanced new system, but sometimes support and sustainment for existing systems get a little bit shortchanged. Personnel, enormous pressure on the RAF force, very small, but as you said, continually engaged at all times. I know that Gavin Williamson, the Defense Secretary, is doing a noble push for some more resources on that front. If you had more resources, where would you invest those additional pounds?
So I described this, I need to thicken my frontline capability, I need to fill in some gaps in my current frontline capability, and I need to grow the next generation Air Force. Do I have all the money that I need to enable all three of those objectives? No. If I was given more money, it would be against those three themes that I would apply it. I need to make sure that I would spend that money wisely. It wouldn't be about buying a whole suite of new capabilities. It would be ensuring that I had the strength and depth and the resilience, especially in my people and in my infrastructure and across that span of capabilities, which would allow the Royal Air Force to do, as it's done throughout its history, of delivering decisive air power effect at global range and doing it for as long as it takes to get the job done.
Two very quick questions. I'm getting the hook, but 1 minute. First, there's a lot of questions whether or not you get to more than 48 F-35s. A number of people have said, hey, FCAS is going to come at a cost. Ask CAS whether or not there are going to be more F-35s in the future. Will there be more F-35s than 48 in the future of the Royal Air Force?
The United Kingdom is repeatedly committed to buying 138 F-35s. That remains our commitment.
And then last question, Tom Neal, one of the true legends of the Battle of Britain, passed last week. Anybody who knew him knew he was literally a giant and a hero and an inspiration. Tell us a little bit, as a combat aviator who wore the same uniform, what did Tom Neal mean to the Royal Air Force and to you personally?
So Tom Neal is, in many ways, exemplifies one of our themes from RAF 100, where we commemorate, and it's that the achievements and the courage and the sacrifice of those who have gone before us. Tom was just the absolute exemplar of that through the Battle of Britain and throughout his career. What a superb aviator, a superb leader, and it's the character and spirit of people like him which is the legacy which today's Royal Air Force inherits. So he continues to be an inspiration for the Air Force. He has been throughout his life, and sadly he is now passed, but he will continue to be an inspiration for us in the future. So our thoughts are with his family, but he's still there in our hearts, and he always will be.
Air Chief Marshal Sir Stephen Hillier, Chief of the Royal Air Force. Sir, thanks very much. It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.